Juventus has had a pretty relaxing season. I mean, sure, they got hit with a 15-point penalty that was then rescinded, then they got hit with a 10-point penalty while multiple former directors of the club were suspended, some of them for multiple years with multiple investigations still ongoing, but other than that, very relaxing season. Amazingly, all of the things I just said are true, and the damage being done to Juventus is far from over. They are up the proverbial creek without not just a paddle, they don't even have a boat, okay? They are sinking. And as somebody that has spent my entire off day researching all of this, I will be the first one to tell you that, like seemingly everything that goes on with the Italian FA and Serie A and everything else, this is incredibly confusing. So allow me, throughout the rest of this video, to unconfuse you so that you can impress your friends with your knowledge of what is actually going on. And in order for you to be unconfused, you need to understand the dark arts. No, I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about the dark arts, the boardroom. Now, the boardroom dark arts are just like the on-the-field dark arts, except they involve hundreds of millions of dollars, and sometimes they're illegal. And as much as we'd like this to be illegal, it's not actually illegal. And the boardroom dark art that Juventus practiced religiously is something called plusvalenza.
Mamma mia!
Now, this roughly translates to capital gains in English, but it doesn't sound nearly as cool as plusvalenza. Now, this concept is actually legal. It's what allows you to count a transfer fee for a player against your FFP over the course of that player's entire contract. So in simple math, if you buy a player for $100 million and sign them to a 10-year contract, then that player counts against your FFP not in one lump sum of $100 million in that first year, but for just $10 million for each of the 10 years of that player's contract. The amount of money is the same, but the amount of impact that that transfer has at the moment that it happens is significantly less. The flip side of this are player sales. Let's say you sell a player for $100 million. Well, instead of counting that towards your accounts as $10 million over the next 10 years, you can count that towards your account as $100 million in the first year. This means that player sales have a huge upside in upfront value, say if you need to spend a little more money. Now, the rules have been updated and they change often, but you're only allowed to take a loss of 60 million euros still over a 3-year period in UEFA's FFP regulations. So if you can somehow manage to present yourself with a huge upfront gain on a player sale, you can quite literally save yourself from massive sanctions. Now, that type of accounting is all legal too, but there are ways that obviously, or else we wouldn't be here, that this dark art can become illegal. And that happens during player swaps. And there was one incredibly notorious example when it comes to Juventus, even though they have done it a bunch of times. That example is Miralem Pjanic for Artur Melo. Now, Artur Melo was a player at Barcelona who was being pushed onto the fringes. Miralem Pjanic, a good player, was getting on in years and finding himself overpaid and underutilized at Juventus. So Juventus shipped Miralem Pjanic to Barcelona, and Barcelona shipped Artur Melo to Juventus. Juventus also sent 12 million euros along with Miralem Pjanic for the trouble of getting the younger, potentially eventually more talented Artur Melo. It was a bit of a weird deal at the time. I didn't understand the logic behind it, but big clubs do stupid stuff all the time, and so you just kind of went and moved on. But then you realize what both clubs actually announced the transfers as. You see, Barcelona announced that it had purchased Miralem Pjanic for 60 million euros. Now, that is patently insane, but Juventus announced that it purchased Artur Melo for 72 million euros. Now, with what we just talked about, a light bulb might have just gone off as to why this made sense both for Juventus and for Barcelona. The players were both valued insanely highly, and that happened because it benefits both teams. So Juventus is able to put a $60 million player sale on its books for the year that the sale happens and distribute the purchase of Artur Melo of $72 million over the course of his contract, providing a serious net gain in the year that that transfer took place. Now, Barcelona, who has well-documented financial woes all over the place, gets $72 million injected straight into its accounts for that year, even though it technically only got 12. Combine that with changing the name of your historic stadium to the Spotify Camp Nou, and you might just be able to financially survive, and that is what Barcelona has managed. This deal obviously points out that there are clubs all over the place doing this, but it has become a particularly large epidemic in Italy, where player transfers out in particular have been the most important way for these clubs to make money. According to this Goal article, in the season before COVID-19 hit, Italian clubs made more money from capital gains than from commercial revenue. That is clearly highly unusual. As you'd imagine in the Premier League, La Liga, Bundesliga, that is not even close to being the case. And that's because they do this with freaking every transfer. Look at Victor Osimhen, for example, purchased from Lille for 70 million euros. Well, 4 players went the other direction from Napoli to Lille so that valuation could be added to their books immediately to meet FFP. And you know, that valuation may or may not have been insane. It was a backup goalkeeper and 3 reserve players for 20 million euros, straight into the books. But back to the legal questions around Juventus and why they are so particularly screwed. Why is it bad to just come up with crazy valuations of players? Well, as it says in this CNN article, it is false accounting and market manipulation. And that is something that has intrigued multiple branches of the legislative process in Italy, which is where we are going to get very fun and complicated. But I have read all of this so that you don't have to. So seriously, focus up. This is your moment. You now understand the process. Now it's time for what actually happened. It started with an investigation by Kovasak in 2021. This is the Supervisory Commission of Serie A. So this is a league matter at this point, and they began investigating dozens of abuses of the capital gains variety. Kovasak then referred its investigation to the FIGC. Now, every time you hear FIGC, think Italian FA. That's the name for the Italian FA. So Kovasak forwards 62 violations that they believe to be wildly inflated player values to the FIGC. I'm gonna say it wrong like 85 times. 42 of those 62 instances involved Juventus alone. Kovasak also forwarded their investigation to the prosecutor of Turin. And in May of 2021, the public prosecutor of Turin opened an investigation into all of it called Prisma. And they were looking at potential violations of the penal code when it came to accounting and reporting the accounting, as well as potential violations when it came to the salary deferment that Juventus negotiated but didn't potentially properly disclose during COVID. But we're not done with our investigation counter. There's another one. CONSOB, because we needed another stupid abbreviation, is what's looking into false accounting and market manipulation of the freaking stock market by improperly reporting assets. They are the body that regulates the dealings of clubs that are listed on the stock exchange, which Juventus is, which involved the Italian financial police in the matter. And by 2021, all of this is going on at the exact same time. And it was at this point that I started to feel like I was researching a banking scandal instead of a club doing bad things. I mean, for crying out loud, the stock market people raided their offices in November of 2021. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Earlier in 2021, it did seem that, at least for the moment, Juventus had swerved the problem. You see, the FIGC probe into the 11 clubs involved in the 62 different instances they were looking into actually fell apart and they lost the case. The clubs simply argued that they were the only people that could possibly be responsible for assigning values to players. So even if the investigators thought the values were terrible and nowhere near accurate, there was just no way to prove that they were misvaluing the players. And rather hilariously, they also found the prosecutors in this whole shindig had relied too heavily on values provided by sites like Transfermarkt, which I proved in this video is not necessarily the most reliable source of information for a case of this magnitude. But this did obviously not stop either of the other significant legal cases being conducted by Turin authorities, the Prisma investigation, or being conducted by CONSOB, the stock market people. So our investigation counter at this point is still at 2, and Juventus might have a boat, but they still don't have a paddle. And after the CONSOB office raid, it was all quiet for about a year. And then it wasn't. That's when the amount of dirt that was being uncovered by the Prisma investigation started to hit the light of day. And how exactly did we find out that that was going on? The entire Juventus board resigned. Now, they were quick. They were very quick to point out that this was not an admission of guilt. But I would counter with the fact that your entire board resigning is certainly not an admission of happy times. Now, the actual reason that the board resigned was because the Prisma investigation had started to uncover some truly devastating, incriminating information. Fabio Paratici, who had been working with Juventus until 2021, apparently had kept a black book detailing the actual financial goings-on at Juventus. I don't know why you would do that. I thought only bad guys in movies did that sort of thing, but apparently the Prisma investigation got its hands on it. They also managed to unearth literal admissions of guilt, according to reports from wiretaps of board members at Juventus. And the bad news for Juventus is that all of this coming to light actually reignited the FIGC, the Italian FA, in its attempts to legislate the problem. By January in 2023, that FIGC investigation was done. Juventus got smashed with a massive 15-point penalty from the FIGC, and that wasn't all that they did with all the information they had newly acquired. They also banned a ton of different executives from Juventus over the time period they were breaking these rules from holding positions in Italian soccer. Andrea Agnelli, who was a big part of the Super League and basically ran Juventus for the majority of its 9 consecutive titles, received a 2-year ban. Fabio Paratici, the connoisseur of the Black Book, received a 2.5-year ban, which was kind of awkward because he left Juventus in 2021 and is like the director of football operations at Tottenham. Tottenham subsequently put him on the back seat until all of this had sorted itself out through appeals, but bad look. Tottenham cannot stop catching strays, dude. Also, have I mentioned they have no trophies? At the time, this knocked Juventus from 3rd to 10th in the league and just rewrote the equation for Champions League qualification for clubs like Inter, AC Milan, and Roma. It is wild to have a team get yeeted 15 points down in the middle of a season. It is also just vintage Italian football, though, isn't it? This is just what they do. This is heritage. Now, Juventus, of course, as they have the right to do, maintained their innocence and sought to appeal this decision by the Italian FA in any way that it could. And they took it to the highest sporting court in Italy, which is the Italian Olympic Committee. Now, my newly minted knowledge on the Italian sporting legal system and this wonderful article by The Athletic informed me that the board of guarantors at the Italian Olympic Committee could only rule on the legitimacy of the case, not the merit of the case. The legal equivalent of double-checking their work for grammar and spelling mistakes instead of double-checking their work for substance. And amazingly, because of course they did, they found something. And I'll let the Attorney General Ugo Tasser take it from there. I fear the application of Article 4 of the FIGC's Justice Code is unfounded in relation to the points penalty awarded against the club in question. And I hope this shortcoming will be assessed again in a new judgment. Yeah. So because the punishment didn't match up with Article 4 in the Justice Code of the Italian FA, the case was sent to the Italian FA's Court of Appeals, giving the FIGC a 3rd shot at the case, and everybody knows 3rd time's a charm. Now, of course, hilariously, this decision in April gave Juventus its 15 points back. It injected Juventus firmly back into the Champions League picture, knocking other clubs who are wondering what the heck is going on out of it. It also brought a wave of optimism at Juventus. The new chief football officer, Francisco Calvo, said, "As of today, we finally have certainty, and we expect that the points that have been given back to us will remain with us forever." Well, now this is just a great example to never trust any PR person that's coming from a club, because as you know, because you've been following every second of this video, all the Olympic Committee did was say that they didn't properly apply the punishment for the decision that had been reached. That just meant the punishment was going to change. Calvo also said that after Juventus had been informed that the FIGC, the Italian FA, had opened another investigation. That's right, baby! 4 investigations! Let's go! It was their own investigation into the salary tomfoolery that Juventus had partaken in during COVID-19. Now, the Prisma investigation into that, the local Turin authorities had been ongoing for a while, but the FIGC felt left out and decided to investigate that as well as the Italian FA. So, what I'm basically saying is that Calvo had a lot of guts being that optimistic, and he was promptly not rewarded for it. Because then Juventus, as you might have noticed recently, rocketed back down the standings. The appeals court of the Italian FA settled on a new punishment that apparently agrees with Article 4. 10 points, officially for Juventus breaking Italian FA rules when it came to properly reporting capital gains. Which brings us back down to 3 investigations. The 10-point deduction, also with apparently no semblance of understanding of the competitive impact of all of this, happened hilariously close to Juventus's match against Empoli, which they promptly got smashed in 4-1, in no small part mentally due to the fact they just had 10 points taken back away from them. Of course, Mr. Calvo has said that they will seek all opportunities to appeal this decision, and they feel like they've been getting attacked from everywhere, but honestly, how many sporting appeals courts can there be in Italy. I won't pretend to understand where else they could go, but I don't know where else they could go. And if they have nowhere else to go, then we have finally settled one of the 4 investigations into Juventus right now. There's so many cases that I'd put all of this together and still lost track because we gotta update that counter. There are 2 Prisma investigations, 1 Consob investigation, and there were, up until a moment ago, 2 FIGC investigations. One of those is gone. We're at 4. Continue. Now, the Italian FA, which does seem to move a lot faster and obviously has a lower burden of proof than the actual legal stuff happening in Italy, they've announced that their trial for salary tomfoolery, all that COVID-19 salary stuff that Juventus did, is going to happen in June. It's right around the corner. And then, of course, there's the small matter of 2 different investigations being led by Turin authorities and 1 investigation by Consob into market manipulation by Juventus. Now, Juventus continues to point out the fact that those 3 investigations haven't gone to trial yet, so the information those investigations provided to the Italian FA for its 1 10-point penalty and potentially other penalty in June could all be illegitimate. And I certainly don't have a doctorate in Italian legal proceedings, but with 3 actual legal criminal investigations going on, the FA penalties and that minus 10 points next to their name could soon be the least of Juventus' problems. And oh yeah, their accounts last year showed a loss of $257 million. And that wasn't even a part of this video. They're so screwed, that was not even in this video. That's Everton levels of bad. As always, if you want to read more on this topic, every article we used for research is linked down in the description. The best one that lays out the overall timeline is gold.com's article. It's absolutely fantastic, where the Athletics article talks more about how it is impacting the team itself. And if you enjoyed us doing all of this research, please do subscribe. It helps grow my hair back. It's been a long process since I had to shave my head. It was for charity, but I do miss hair. And if you want to keep binge watching videos and you just secretly enjoy hearing about the downfall of different clubs, this is about how screwed Valencia is. They're also screwed. Different reason though. Very different reason. Also stupid.